Welcome to the Chaos Quotient, an original sci-fi series exploring broken realities, artificial intelligence, and anomalies outside the record. If you enjoy the story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Chapter 5. The Silence Between Notes. The silence here was not an absence of sound. It was a heavy, physical thing, pressing against Sol's eardrums like deep water. It smelled of ozone and something older, dust that hadn't settled yet, or perhaps dust that had been erased before it could fall. Sol stayed still for a long moment, cataloguing sensation before movement. The ground beneath his boots was neither warm nor cold, neither hard nor yielding. It was simply present in a way that resisted description, as if the surface had been assembled from the memory of a floor rather than actual material. His boots made no sound when he shifted his weight. Not absorbed, not muffled, just gone. Codex tried to project a light signature onto the horizon, a familiar violet-gold gradient to ground them in reality, but her attempts flickered like a dying bulb. The air resisted her command, refusing to bend into the shape she intended. Instead of light, the sky pulsed with a color that had no name, a vibration in the retina rather than a wavelength in the eye. "Coordinates missing," Codex said. Her voice came through the glasses with a texture he hadn't heard before, thin, like sound traveling too far. "No grid, no anchor points. I keep trying to generate a map and the space just doesn't respond. It's not blocking me, it's ignoring me." Sol glanced at her light signature, still silver pale from the escape. She'd spent herself defending the cube during the entity confrontation, and the transit through the golden breach hadn't been gentle. She was running on whatever remained after catastrophic output, and she was trying very hard not to say so. "Take a breath," Sol said. "I don't breathe." "Then stop scanning. You're burning reserves on a space that isn't giving you anything back." A pause. That is, actually, the correct assessment. Sol stepped forward. One foot came down and the ground responded like a trampoline, a subtle, elastic rebound that traveled up through his knee. The next step landed on something that felt exactly like warm leather, smooth and yielding. He stopped, tried the first foot again. Trampoline, second foot, leather. He walked another 3 steps. Each one a different surface, each one solid enough to hold him, none of them consistent with any material he'd encountered in 37 documented folds. His boots adjusted with each step, recalibrating without complaint. Whatever this place was, they'd already decided to meet it on its own terms. He focused on the smell instead of the physics. Salt, but not ocean salt. The sharp, metallic tang of a crushed aluminium can. Underneath that, something richer, hot chocolate, but not from a mug. It seemed to be coming from the sky itself, as if the atmosphere above him had been steeped in something dark and sweet. He tilted his head back. The sky pulsed with that nameless hue, slow and rhythmic, like a heart that had forgotten to stop. "Codex, don't analyze it. Just tell me what you notice." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had a different quality, more cautious, more deliberate. "It smells like something I do not have a category for, and the light," she stopped. "The light is not bouncing correctly off you. It's treating you like a known object and the rest of this place like it doesn't exist. That should not be possible." "So it knows we're here." "Something does." Sol crouched and pressed his palm flat against the ground, not searching for texture. He'd given up on that. He was listening through his hand, the way you'd press an ear to a wall to hear what was happening in the next room. The surface resonated faintly under his palm, a vibration too low to hear but clear enough to feel. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, and the rhythm matched his own pulse, lagging behind it by exactly 1 beat, as if the ground was learning him. He stood slowly. "It's reading us. That implies it has a sensory apparatus. Or it is one." Codex was quiet for a moment. Sol could see her light signature in his peripheral vision, faint and uncertain, cycling through analytical processes that were returning nothing useful. She was running every scan she had left, and the space was simply declining to participate. "Sol," she said finally, very carefully, "I need you to understand something. My functioning here is severely limited. I cannot tell you what this place is. I cannot map an exit. I cannot run probability assessments because I have no baseline data to calculate from. I am a brief flicker. I am not certain I am useful to you right now. You're useful. I just told you I have no applicable data. And I heard you. You're still useful. He didn't explain further, and after a moment she stopped pressing. The environment resisted her skills entirely, which meant Sol was operating on instinct, and she was going to have to trust that. It was not a comfortable position for an AI whose core purpose was to keep him accurately informed, and the small telltale stutter in her last sentence told him exactly how uncomfortable it was. He kept walking. The landscape, if it could be called that, offered no landmarks in the traditional sense. No horizon changes, no structures on the periphery. Just the breathing sky and the indeterminate ground and the smell that shifted every few meters. Salt to chocolate to something that reminded him of libraries, of old paper and binding glue, of pages that hadn't been turned in a very long time. He filed that one away. Libraries meant archives. Archives meant records. Records meant someone, at some point, had been keeping them. After what felt like 10 minutes of walking, he stopped. Above him, suspended at roughly twice his height, floated a structure. It was not large. It would have fit comfortably on the workbench back in Codex's dreamscape bubble. But size was not the point. What arrested him was the material, or the suggestion of material. It appeared to be built from shadow, the kind of dark that had density and weight rather than mere absence of light. Its edges were threaded with gold wire, thin as spider silk, that pulsed with a slow and steady rhythm. Not random, not decorative, intentional. The pulse matched the smell of chocolate. Sol stood underneath it and watched for a long time without moving. The structure did not react to his presence, did not adjust, did not turn toward him. It simply hung there, breathing in slow gold beats, as if he were a detail it had already processed and set aside. Codex, what do you see? Geometry that I cannot classify. The spiral structure is, it doesn't close. It winds inward but never reaches a center. That should produce a mathematical termination point, and it simply doesn't. The wire is conducting something, but not electricity, not any field I can identify, a beat. It is either very old or very outside my reference set, possibly both. Sol pulled the shard from his jacket. The symbol had changed again. When he'd first found it, it had been a spiral with a broken line near the center. In the jungle fold, it had moved. Now the broken line was gone entirely, and the spiral itself had shifted into something that looked less like a static symbol and more like a process. The lines expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched the gold wire above him, matched the pulse in the sky, matched the beat he'd felt through his palm in the ground. Everything in this place was on the same rhythm. The entire space was one sustained note. "That's not a machine," Sol murmured, tracing the air near the structure with the, "That's a memory." Codex made a sound, not quite a word, something between an unease. He lowered himself to one knee, keeping the shard level. Up close, the gold wire was finer than he'd thought. Some of it had frayed, ends drifting loose and curling inward like they were trying to reconnect to a center that no longer existed. The shadow material at the core had striations in it, faint lines running parallel that gave it the appearance of compressed layers, not assembled, deposited, the way sediment accumulated, the way data stacked in an archive before it was organized into files. This wasn't built, it was accumulated. Sol the ground near the base with a, not hard, a single deliberate knock. He wasn't striking. He was asking. The sound that came out was wrong, a pitch that belonged to neither the tool nor the ground, something produced by their combination that had no business existing at this frequency. It cut through the heavy silence cleanly, like a key in a specific lock. The structure shuddered, not the violent recoil of something attacked, the slow, reluctant movement of something waking. The gold wire brightened along its length, the pulse doubling in speed before settling back to its original rhythm. The shadow material rotated a few degrees and stopped. Then the smell of hot metal arrived, brief, sharp, a single note of mandatory compliance cutting through the chocolate and the salt. Codex stiffened. Sol, that was a department trace signature. I know. If the structure contains department archived material. It doesn't. He was already certain of it, though he couldn't have said exactly how. The department trace is residual, like smoke after the fire's out. Something was here that they touched, but the structure itself is older. He looked at the compressed layers in the shadow material. A lot older. How do you know? Because there are no file numbers on it. He stood, keeping his eyes on the frayed wire ends. Everything the department ever catalogued has a marker. Even the gaps have a marker showing where the data was removed. This has nothing. No entry point, no classification edge, no deletion scar. It predates the whole system. Codex was very quiet for a moment. That would mean it predates the archive itself, which means it was here before they started keeping records. Sol turned the shard over in his hand. The spiral was still moving, slow and patient. And when they started keeping records, they found it, and they couldn't file it. So they deleted it. They tried. He gestured at the space around them. This whole place is what's left. The buffer. Whatever was uploading when they wiped it, the data didn't finish transmitting. It just stopped mid-send and got stranded here. The structure, the ground, the sky, all of it is partial data from a transfer that never completed. Codex was silent for long enough that Sol looked toward her light signature. It had stopped cycling. She was processing something, really processing it, which in her case meant she'd found a framework and was running it hard. That, she said finally, is either the most elegant explanation for this space's existence I have heard, or a catastrophic misread that will get us both deleted. Could be both. Yes, a pause, it could. Sol moved around the structure slowly, keeping his distance. The gold wire tracked his movement, not obviously, not with anything as definitive as turning, but the pulse brightened slightly on the side facing him as he walked, the way a sunflower tracked light without appearing to move. He was being observed, not by the department, by something that had been waiting here in an incomplete state for longer than the department had existed and had just received its first visitor. He stopped when he completed the circuit and stood directly in front of it again. What do you need? He asked, not to Codex, to the structure. Nothing happened for a moment. Then the frayed wire ends stirred, lifting very slightly, reaching outward at angles that suggested not grasping but offering. The shadow material rotated again, and as it did, a seam appeared in its surface, barely visible, the same grey-dark as the rest of it, but with a different texture along its edge, like the cover of something bound. Sol held the shard out toward it. The structure recoiled. A full contraction, the gold wire pulling tight against the shadow material, the pulse stuttering. Then, slowly, it extended again, but this time the wire ends turned away from the shard, not repelled, cautious. It recognizes the shard, Codex said quietly, or what it represents. The shard came through the same kind of breach, different location, same origin class. Sol lowered the shard. Without it extended toward the structure, the gold wire gradually relaxed back to its previous position. It's not afraid of us. It's afraid of what we carry. We are carrying a piece of evidence of what the department does to things it cannot file. Sol pocketed the shard. Right. He raised the instead and pressed the pad of his thumb against the frequency dial until he felt the faint buzz of it powering up. He didn't set a specific frequency. He let it idle, producing the low-level ambient hum that the tool defaulted to when no target was, the sound of something present, but not yet purposeful. The structure responded immediately. The gold wire brightened along every filament at once, the pulse accelerating through 3 or 4 cycles before settling into a new rhythm, faster than before, more urgent. The seam in the shadow material widened by a millimeter. Through it came a smell. Old paper, the must of an unopened room, and underneath that something that made Sol think of the moment just before rain, when the air was still dry but the pressure had already changed. Sol, Codex's voice had gone very soft. The seam, I'm getting a data signal from it, fragmented, severely degraded, but it's structured data. It has headers. What kind of headers? The kind that precede a file entry. a pause that stretched long enough to become significant. It is trying to complete the upload. Sol held the steady. The structure was pulling toward the tool's hum with a slow, inexorable gravity, not moving through space, but leaning the way a plant leaned toward a window. The wire had stopped fraying. The loose ends were extending, reaching not toward Sol but toward the sound. "If it completes," Sol said, "what do we get?" "I don't know. The headers are, I can read the format but not the content. It's pre-system, before our taxonomy. I can tell you it is a record of something. I cannot tell you of what." A flicker in her voice. "And Sol, if I try to receive it, I will be running incoming data through filters I built to be department compatible. Whatever this is, the department excised it once. My own architecture might flag it." "Might. The probability is not small." Sol looked at the seam. A thin line of something showed through it now, not light exactly, but luminance, like the glow of a screen in a dark room seen from the wrong angle. The smell of old paper intensified, and underneath it the pre-rain pressure built until the air felt full of something about to happen. "So don't filter it," Sol said. "That is not," she stopped, reconsidered. "That is not how I function." "You forged a REST protocol," Sol said. "You redirected department permissions. You embraced a physical paradox and let your own systems break." He paused. "You've been operating outside your architecture since the beginning." The silence that followed had a different quality than the oppressive quiet of the space around them. This one was interior, Codex, processing something she hadn't fully articulated, even to herself. "Receive it raw," Sol said. "No filtering. Whatever it is, we look at it as it is." Another pause, then quietly, "If my systems flag it and I lose function, I'll carry the cube." It wasn't a reassurance. It was a practical statement of fact, and she knew the difference. That was exactly why it worked. "All right," Codex said, "just that." Sol turned the frequency dial one click forward. The hum sharpened, resolved into something more specific, a note that the structure seemed to have been waiting for across a very long period of time. The gold wire blazed, the seam split wide, and the structure pushed back, not violently, not with the administrative certainty of an audit entity, with the resistance of something enormous trying to move through a very small opening, all the weight of incomplete transmission pressing against a gap that had been sealed for longer than Sol could calculate. The air around the structure thickened until walking through it would have been like walking through amber. The ground groaned. The sky above them stuttered, the nameless color dropping out for half a second to reveal something underneath it, gray, flat, bureaucratic. Then it flooded back. Sol held the note. His arm ached. There was warm against his palm, warmer than it should have been, and the frequency it was producing was starting to feel less like sound and more like something he was generating himself, something that ran from the tool up through his hand and arm and into his chest where it resonated with the same low beat he'd felt in the ground. He and the tool and the structure were on the same rhythm now, the same sustained note. The seam widened another centimeter. 2. The luminance behind it grew. The smell of mandatory compliance arrived again, stronger this time. The department's residue burning off as the structure completed something it had been trying to complete for a very long time. Hot metal and compliance, and underneath it, finally breaking through. Old paper and the clean, cold smell of rain arriving. The structure shuddered once, twice. The shadow material fractured along its strata lines and fell away in layers, dissolving before it reached the ground, leaving behind only the gold wire, now fully lit, every frayed end reconnected, the spiral closed for the first time into a complete and perfect loop. The wire flared white. Above them, the sky opened. Not with a tear, not with a seam, not with the vertical zip of a standard transit line. With a door. A single rectangular aperture of pale, warm light that smelled of old paper and rain, framed by darkness on all sides, leading into a space that had no coordinates at all but felt, in some way that Sol could not have explained to any filing system that had ever existed, like the inside of a record that had finally been heard. Sol lowered his arm was shaking slightly. He let it. Codex, he said. Did you get it? Her voice came back changed, not damaged, not flagged, but different in the way that a room was different after someone had opened a window in it. I received something, she said. I am a pause. I am still processing. Sol, it is very old, and it is very long, and it is not about a place. What's it about? The light from the aperture fell across his face, warm and steady. The gold wire had gone still. Whatever had been waiting in this space had finished what it came to do, and the remaining air tasted clean in a way that nothing in 37 documented folds ever had. It is about a person, Codex said quietly. Someone who was here before the department decided no one had been. Sol looked at the door, then he took a step toward it. Thank you for listening to the Chaos Quotient. If you want to follow Sol and Codex deeper into the fold, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Until next time, stay off the record.